Austin Faith Dialogue, a public affairs program at the crossroads of religion and life. A series of programs highlighting the social and cultural interaction between the worshiping and larger communities in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by the Austin Area Conference of Churches in cooperation with KTBC. Join us now in today's Austin Faith Dialogue.
Hello, I'm Bren Douglas, pastor of Simpson United Methodist Church, and your host for today's Austin Faith Dialogue. This religious public affairs program is brought to you by the Austin Area Conference of Churches and KTBC. If you've been watching this program during the month of August, you will remember this is a series of programs dealing with the homeless in Austin. We've talked about some of the homeless on the streets, and we've talked about some of the problems they experience. Today we will talk about some of the programs available in Austin to decrease the number of homeless in Austin. But first, let's take a look at a report aired on Channel 7, a report that shows why homeless and the hungry and these programs that we are going to see today are so important to the homeless and the hungry.
There are pockets of poverty unnoticed along the banks of Lake Travis, hidden underneath downtown bridges and often out of sight and out of mind for many Austin residents. These are the makeshift shelters of the homeless, perhaps the most compelling image of poverty in America. A frequent reminder of the destitution here is hunger. Many are experiencing it for the first time.
And I've slept out in the bushes by myself too, because I had no place to go. And it's cold. You're hungry and you're cold and you're freezing and you're scared. It's terrible.
Wait a minute. That hunger can lead to desperation. Grown men forced to forage through trash cans looking for food. It's a scene being repeated across America at an alarming rate. These homeless men refer to it jokingly as dumpster diving.
Have you all been dumpster diving very long?
Well, I don't know. Whenever we need to, I guess we can put it off.
When you're hungry, you do anything.
When odd jobs are scarce or when food stamps run out toward the end of the month, some of the homeless collect aluminum cans to pay for their next meal. 24-year-old Michael Kane works the alleys, restaurants, and malls throughout Travis County. He earns 1 penny for each can collected.
You've got $12 in that sack right there worth of aluminum cans.
Yeah, at least.
That'll keep you fed for how long?
2 or 3 days. See, the thing about it is if you don't have that much money, $12 can go a long way.
Reverend David Cunningham and Lenora Yount are familiar with the discouraged faces of hunger. They and other volunteers with the Hill Country Ministries organization bring truckloads of food to Lake Travis every week. Waiting for them are families living in campers, pitch tents, or station wagons. Families who've lost their jobs and often their homes as well. Lenora Yount refers to them as lake people.
There is about, I'd say 200 or 300 of them, and they're just scattered around from one part to another. And it's because they can't get jobs. And they're just down on their luck.
I don't want to look at the future. Why's that?
don't look too good.
Alice Sapp and Bernice Harvey are among the many poor who've set up temporary homes at Lake Travis. Their husbands were laid off from a Houston chemical plant in February and have since been driving from one Texas city to another in search of steady work. But jobs are scarce and their money is gone. And today's priority is finding something to eat.
What are you doing to get by for food?
My husband and her husband's picking up cans and hustling odd jobs and stuff. Just whatever they can do for a couple of bucks.
Is it enough?
It's never enough, but it's helping. It's keeping us from starving.
Thank you very much.
Less than 100 yards away, 56-year-old Tommy Trammell can be found living in his car. It's a hardship he's endured since he was laid off from his Houston restaurant job.
How long have you been living in your car, Tommy?
About 6 months now. And I really don't like it, but I'm 56 years old now. And a lot of people won't give me a job because of my age, you know.
Far away from Tommy Trammell and Lake Travis, and far away from the men foraging through dumpsters downtown, there is another more familiar face of hunger. They are the families, homeowners living on the edge of homelessness. Tomorrow we'll talk to some of them.
Our home is practically paid for, our vehicles are paid for, yet we had to go and ask for food.
Gary Gabriel, Channel 7 News, Weekend Report.
Our guests today are persons who can and are making a difference with some of the problems facing the homeless and causing many people to become homeless. Mrs. Cotel Haynes with GATCO, Mr. Joseph James, Director of City Economic Development, and Mr. Bill Domesticus with Private Industry Council, PIC. We're delighted to have you with us today as our guest.
Thank you.
Looking at that report, we see that transitional is a problem of people moving and really not having a place to stay, and quite often the Salvation Army try to accommodate this, but I know that is not always possible. Mrs. Haynes, what do you see as an alternative to Salvation Army?
Well, Bryn, you're awfully right. The Salvation Army has done a tremendous job providing temporary overnight shelter to the homeless in Austin for a number of years. But of course, since the number of homeless has grown tremendously in the city, there needs to be a next step. Once you are at this facility, and of course Salvation Army frequently targets single males or at least single individuals, and families have an awfully hard time continuing to exist or live in a Salvation Army environment. We do not have many facilities that are transitional, as you said. Transitional in the sense that a place where these homeless families can go and stabilize, find employment, save a few bucks, and stabilize enough to move into a more independent living situation. The Greater Austin Housing Development Corporation, whom I represent, is in the process of providing a transitional housing program for the homeless. Our goal is to purchase somewhere between 10 to 25 unit apartment complex and provide the homeless an opportunity to stay with us anywhere from 6 months to a year, and during that time actually go and seek employment, seek job training, get food assistance, whatever they might need, other kinds of counseling services, so that they actually may stabilize and move on and let somebody else who may find themselves in a similar position have their unit as they move on and up.
Okay, so these transitional people are just represent one category of people, and as we saw on the report and as you mentioned, their families, which also suggests that many people are homeless because they've been evicted, or lost their jobs, or just lack of jobs, and what do you see for Austin in terms of providing maybe more jobs for people who are presently without jobs, and of course without jobs they're without homes?
Well, Reverend, the purpose of our department is to in fact increase and retain as many jobs here in Austin as we possibly can. We work with local businesses. We also work along with the Austin Chamber and several other business groups to try to attract new companies to Austin. And we're particularly concerned about providing employment to disadvantaged individuals in our community. And one of the initiatives that we've undertaken in the last several months is the creation of an enterprise zone in East and portions of South Austin. And within that particular area, we're working to help companies expand their operations or locate new facilities. And in return for some incentives that we in the city might provide to those companies, they are under very specific requirements to hire disadvantaged individuals that are residents of that area or citywide. And we are hard about the task of creating new employment opportunities. And in fact, as I've looked over our caseload most recently, we've got about 7 transactions that we're involved in the Enterprise Zone program alone. We expect about 700 jobs to be created through that effort.
700 jobs.
Yes, and again, the requirement is that disadvantaged individuals, unemployed individuals, people who are JTPA eligible, and I think Bill Domestos will tell us more about what that means, are part of the people that are required to be hired by those companies that we benefit in some sort of way.
Okay, that sounds good. I'm sure that's not nearly enough, but it sure sounds like it will make a good dent into the mass need that we have at this time. Mr. Domestos, can you tell us more about providing, I guess, training for some of the people who need skills developed or even upgraded?
We are serving a variety of people in the Austin community now and have been doing so for several years. We also have worked with the city and with the Chamber of Commerce in order to try to deal with the need in this community for trained and capable people to get jobs. This last year we would have served approximately 1,400 people in our program of both youth and adults. 90% of those would have been successful in our programs, but we are only really touching the surface of the need in this community. The federal funds that we have available to us are Job Training Partnership Act funds, as Joe mentioned, and those funds have some fairly strict guidelines that are set by the federal government. They basically have to be very poor people, but on top of just being poor, they must also be able to show that they are residents of this area, that if they are of age for selective service, that they must have registered. Those kind of criteria sometimes prove to be barriers to the homeless who would otherwise be eligible but must prove certain facts in order to be able to be served under our programming. Those that are in a residence, even of friends or in other relatives, can typically meet that condition. Those that are on the street, however, find it much more difficult to be served by our programs and to get the kind of job training they need in order to advance and be able to afford a place to live.
It sounds like we are ready for that facility you're talking about. Apparently there must be a lot of cooperation between the city and the private industry council.
Yes, we work very closely, as Bill indicated, not only to attract new companies in, but also to work with our existing businesses. And Bill has served along with us and some others to develop a program to help retain jobs here in Austin. There was a time when we were very concerned about companies leaving Austin and taking their jobs somewhere else. I think we've got a better handle on that these days, but still we're very concerned about our existing businesses as well. Most growth in a community, as you look across the nation, has come from the expansion of existing companies, and just very rarely on a national basis are we able to attract companies in from outside. The homeless issue, we take a preventive approach, at least in our department, to the extent that we can provide employment, provide better jobs for people even if they're currently employed. By working with our business community, we can prevent at least Austinites from becoming part of the homeless in our city.
What are some of the problems that impede economic development?
Well, depending on the areas of the city that we work in, some areas are harder to encourage economic activity than others. Some of the environmental factors, such as crime and the physical decay of a neighborhood. So, when we look at places in East Austin and maybe parts of South Austin, there needs to be some attention given to that local environment. And one of the recent initiatives that we in the city, in cooperation with a local neighborhood, are involved in is called Operation Impact. And that centers around the East 11th and East 12th Street areas. some of the higher crime areas in our city and some of the areas that have the highest unemployment and the highest poverty in our community. And by a joint initiative between ourselves and the local community, several city departments are beginning to focus their resources to make a difference in that community, to create an environment in which more investment is possible.
Because perhaps at this time it's not attractive in some of the areas where bankers and other investors would want to put
that's
money in.
That's certainly correct. And this is a kind of an initiative that goes hand in hand with the whole enterprise zone concept, trying to improve the business environment, the quality of life in general for a local community that we'd like to stimulate more job creation and more business activity. The housing initiative is very important in the Operation Impact concept as well.
Are there special programs that you have for homeless and these people, handicapped? You mentioned that did deal with
yes,
that.
One of the transactions that we're involved in right now in the Enterprise Zone program is with an organization that uses handicapped or mentally impaired individuals and provides work experience for them in the production of an actual product or service. We're hoping that our financial involvement in that through one of our business loan programs will create an opportunity for them to expand that operation here in Austin. And while it's not directed solely to the homeless, it does provide services to individuals that might be part of that population if otherwise not served.
Oh, Mr. Domesticus, perhaps do you experience difficulty in getting funding and for some of your programming for helping the low-income people?
Yes. No matter how much funding we have, it really is never going to meet the total needs in the community, but we are seeking out additional funding on top of the allocation that's been given to us of JTPA funds. A special project that we're engaged in now in trying to serve that population of the homeless that are on the streets is we're seeking separate funding from the Department of Labor. With that extra funding, it would try to secure those support services necessary to help somebody stabilize their lives enough to be able to take advantage of our programming. So we have submitted a proposal. We are awaiting word now. We are also submitting proposals to some local foundations for some additional services and some additional funds. And together with these local foundations and this additional federal money and our existing federal funds, we hope to now be able to serve a population that has gone unserved by the Private Industry Council thus far.
One of the things it seems to me that's going to be very important is that there be some kind of liaison between among the organizations that so much is going on that even many people may not know where to tap into resources. And I was wondering, with the homeless and the various causes for people being homeless, for instance, the chemical dependency, do you work with other agencies that you kind of tap in that they can be directed, you know, where to turn for help?
Absolutely. One very critical component of the GADCO approach is to do exactly what you're saying. We think it is very important that the homeless have several problems. It's a multi-pronged problem, and therefore it requires a multi-pronged approach. As a matter of fact, we have talked and coordinated with the Private Industry Council to try to get job training for the homeless folks who will be in our facility. In addition, we will coordinate with the People's Clinic to provide health exams for these individuals. Of course, if you're not healthy, as your report showed, if you're not healthy, you're not going to be able to maintain a job. If you can't maintain a job, you can't pay the rent, and so on. We've coordinated with a number of the agencies that provide food, including the Capital Area Food Bank. Just, you know, all the various services. One other important one is transportation. A number of the homeless don't live in their cars. They don't have a car to live in. If they're to have a job and keep a job, then they're going to have to have transportation. So we're working with Capital Metro to get bus passes for our homeless residents.
That will be also services that we can provide if they become JTP eligible. To add to that, we find that a lot of people we serve generally are in crisis. Yeah. And you have to deal with that crisis first before you can really have any effect on actually providing them training and then helping them to stay in employment. So transportation, child care, food, emergency medical care are some of the services that we can provide if we can get them to the point where we can make them eligible for our services.
Yeah, I can imagine hungry and cold people will not focus on on the training, and so you've got to deal with the whole problem and know where to tap in resources.
Reverend, if I could comment on that, I think you've heard two examples of how to prepare people for employment. And that's why this relationship and communication between the various actors involved in this process is important. Employers need good employees, need people who can get to work, who've been trained to operate effectively at work. And to the extent that we can maintain a good line of communication with Bill and Clotilde and others in the community who are working on this issue, we believe we can have an impact.
And that's kind of what that program is about, impact. Pulling together and looking at the whole, the problem as a whole. I think we're going to be moving to a close, and I just wondered if you had any last word that you could share with us, and what maybe community people who might be watching us today, wanting to maybe feel helpless, concerned but helpless, could do to help in terms of supporting some of the programs.
Well, I'd like to say that it is true that the various governmental sources that traditionally have provided housing are drying up. To the extent that we can forge partnerships between the government, the private sector, community organizations, nonprofit, we need to do that. And let's jointly focus on this problem, because I think that we've got the resources there to make a tremendous impact on the problem. It just takes a very specific targeting of those resources. And I think anybody that wants to help, there are certainly a number of organizations out there that should call, and we can pull together to approach this problem.
It seems also that it's a good sign of the way we're doing business in town, is that we're looking at both the short-term and long-term goals of how we solve these problems. And I think through a joint efforts of the different organizations, we'll have a better chance of not just dealing with our present problem, but hoping to prevent problems in the future in Austin.
So what we've talked about today is housing and people who are hungry, but really we are talking about a ministry to the whole person, because you just can't deal with one area and neglect the other. So it's important that we have places to get the information to each other and across. We are grateful for that you have shared with us today so willingly, and we're doing pretty well on time. I keep watching, and we're in good shape here, so we have a few more moments. I think in terms of children who are hungry along with their parents, and parents not having places to leave them, even to look for employment. And so I'm thinking child care is another place that you would be connected with in order to help with minister to the whole family.
That is a very important component for us. While we're not a child care specialist, obviously, in our department, we do seek to work along with providers of child care, and I think Bill can speak about some programs that he's involved in.
That's one of the services we do provide if they become eligible for our programming, is up to 6 months worth of child care. 3 months at 100% of the pay, and then another 3 months at 50%. That does allow for that transition in order for somebody to get to work, put away some money before they have those child care costs looming up in front of them. Last year alone, we spent over $300,000 in child care services for individuals.
We're trying to augment that allocation for child care through the Enterprise Zone program. We're requiring that the companies that we benefit with the incentives return a portion or a percentage of that incentive back in the form of a contribution to a daycare pool, which will work very closely along with Bill and his program.
So the dollar keeps moving around,
yes.
So it provides jobs for the people for daycare, and also the ministry for the parents who need the help. We are moving to a close of our program now for today, and again, we are indeed grateful to you that you've taken time out to be with us today and to share your experiences and your work. Our guests today, again, Mrs. Clotel Haynes, Mr. Joseph James, Mr. Bill Domesticus, all people working together in Austin, because we realize that we've got to work together, and the programs are to be designed to alleviate some of the stress in the economy. And when the stress in the economy has been decreased, of course, we'll see more people being housed, and it sounds like housing is on the way. People who are unskilled are becoming skilled, and people who are working for minimum wages are being upgraded in their skills in order that they may be competitive for better jobs. And of course, better jobs may mean better housing. Thank you for joining us today. And remember, the success of these programs depend on individual and community support. We are people working together to help people.